most amazing artist. I hope you're having an amazing day so far. Welcome back to our fall pumpkin project. Last week we drew our symmetrical pumpkin just using a pencil, and now this week we get to color it using value. And when I say value, I mean add shading to our pumpkin to give it form. Right now it looks pretty flat. It's just a flat shape right now. It does not look 3D, it looks 2D. But today what we're going to do is we're going to add value to our pumpkin, give it some shading, give it some highlights, and we are going to make it look a lot more three-dimensional and give it form. So the materials that we're going to need today are, of course, your drawing that you did last week, and Miss M is going to use oil pastels. Now these are like crayons, but they're a little bit more oily and waxy. They're a lot softer than crayons, and they blend together very well. If you do not have oil pastels, absolutely no worries, my friend. You can just use crayons, okay? But you should use either crayons or oil pastels, and you're only going to need 5 colors. I'm going to use my 3 warm colors, red, orange, and yellow, and I'm going to use a brown color, and we will also need a white. Okay, so now that we know everything that we're going to need today, let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to move my warm colors off to the side of my white because we are going to start with brown. And we are going to use brown to outline our pumpkin. So wherever we put pencil, we're going to take a brown oil pastel or a brown crayon, and we are going to carefully outline our shapes here. And I want to press down pretty hard because I want these lines to be nice and bold. We worked really hard on these drawings, so we don't want any of those lines that we drew last time to disappear in our coloring. So that is why we are making them nice and dark and bold. And when we're using either crayons or oil pastels, we have to be super careful because we can't erase it, okay? If you do make a mistake, we know the drill. It's not the end of the world. We're human, right? We are not perfect. Mistakes are going to happen. What matters is your attitude towards that mistake, okay? We have to stay positive and we have to have a good attitude. There's lots of different things that we could do to fix our mistakes. We could turn it into something new, we could cover it up, or we could just choose to ignore it. And sometimes mistakes are so little no one is going to notice except for you. So we can make that choice together. You can make that choice on your own, but if you make a mistake, it is not the end of the world, my friends. It is okay. All right, so as I'm doing this, I like to rotate my paper because, especially if you're using oil pastels, these can be very messy. And if you take it with your fingers, so actually let me just show you on the back. If you draw with oil pastel and you take your finger, you can actually smudge it out a little bit and it can get pretty messy. We are not going to smudge anything right now. Okay, we're just outlining, and I'm rotating it because that'll help me keep my hand away from these lines that I already made. If I drag my hand across it, that brown is going to smear all across my pumpkin, so we have to be super careful while using this oil pastel. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and finish outlining this, and then I'll be right back to show you the next step. Okay, and there is my pumpkin outlined. Now, just as a side note, if you're in my face-to-face classes, your fingers will get a little bit messy with oil pastels, and that's totally fine. This is art class, so it's going to get a little bit messy. If you do get oil pastels on your hand, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. We're not going to wash our hands because we just don't have time for it in our 45-minute art classes, but at the end of class, when we line up, Miss M will give you a wipe and you can just wipe your fingers off that way, okay? So no worries at all if it gets messy and gets on your hand. The only thing is we just want to be mindful that we're not smearing this oil pastel around on our paper, okay? So when we're adding value, we want to think from dark to light. Okay, value is the lightness and darkness of a color. Okay, and that's how we can add form to a shape. Right now, it still looks very flat. It's very two-dimensional. But when we add our value, we're gonna start from darkest to lightest. So brown is the darkest, so we're gonna keep on using brown in just a minute. Then we're gonna use red, and then orange, yellow, and white. As you can see, it gradually gets lighter until it gets to white, which is the brightest, and that's what our highlight is going to be put on with, okay? So I am not gonna start with white, yellow, or orange, or red even. I'm gonna continue using brown because that's my darkest color. So we start with our darkest color first. And what we're going to do is we're gonna do the very top of our pumpkin, okay? And I'm just gonna do a little bit of brown. We don't need a lot, okay? Just a little bit. I just colored a little line at the top. And I'm gonna do that for all of my segments of my pumpkin. I'm just coloring the very tops of each segment here. Okay, we don't want to bring it down too far because then we won't have enough room for all the rest of our colors. And 2 more segments of our pumpkin to go. And as you can see, I'm pressing down pretty hard, okay? I want this brown to be nice and dark because that's actually going to be the shadow on our pumpkin. That's going to be the darkest area, okay? And my last segment here, just coloring the top of it. It's about as wide as my finger. That's how much we are coloring on the top. And we are going to do the same on the bottom parts of our segments. And we're going to do it the same exact way, just on the bottom now. Okay, trying my best to color all those white spaces in the area where I'm coloring. Okay, and I'm just going to check to make sure that it's about as wide as my finger so that we keep our shadows consistent. And for now, we are going to be done with the brown, okay? So we're going to go to our next darkest color, which is red. And right underneath where I put the brown, I'm going to add the red, and I'm going to do about a finger wide. We don't need a lot of the red because pumpkins are mainly orange, right? And I am going to take my red, and if you're using crayons, you'll do the same thing. And I'm gonna go over top of my brown a little bit. And what happens when we layer our colors is they start to blend together and become one. Okay, that's how shading starts to happen. That's how value starts to happen, is we want it to have a nice gradient. So I'm not coloring on top of the entire brown section that I did, just a little bit to blend my red and my brown together. And I'm taking my time. I'm actually going over it a few times to make sure I'm blending it very well. Okay, can you see how my red has blended into my brown? That's because I just layered my red right on top of the brown. And I went over it a couple times to make sure that it was nice and blended. And I'm gonna do that for all these top sections here. Remember, just make sure it's about a finger wide. We don't want to color any more than that. We are going to make this mainly orange, but right now we are just adding the shadows. All right, there is my red done on the top. I did a little bit too much on this side, but it's okay. All these colors are going to blend together anyways, so don't worry about it if you accidentally color too much. Okay, this is oil pastel or crayon if you're using crayon, and we won't be able to erase it, but we can work with any mistake that happens, okay? So I'm gonna do the same to the bottom, and then I'll be right back to show you the next step. Alright, so I'm done with my red for now. We might use it again later, but I'm going to go ahead and go to my next darkest color, which is orange. And as we know, pumpkins are mainly orange, right? So we can color a little bit more orange than we have been with our brown and our red. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go right underneath where I colored with red, and I'm gonna color orange, okay? I'm actually gonna bring it down quite a bit. Maybe, let's say, 3 fingers wide. Yeah, let's do 3 fingers wide. Just like this, okay? So we should have mostly orange, and I'm gonna blend again. I'm gonna take my orange, I'm gonna go over top of that red that I just did, and I'm gonna blend those colors together. I don't have to press down very hard to do this. I'm just lightly going over that red area and blending my orange into my red by layering it on top. And I'm gonna do the same for every single segment of my pumpkin. I'm gonna do the top first, and then I will do the bottom. Making sure to try my best to color in all of those white spaces and blend this orange into the red by just layering it on top. I just finished my orange. I did the top, and I did the same exact thing on the bottom of my pumpkin. And we are going to go to the next darkest color, which is yellow. Now, let's talk a little bit about yellow oil pastels. They can get very dirty, okay? So if your oil pastel has some dirt or other colors on it, then you can just take your finger and wipe it off. Or you can do a little bit on your messy mat, just color where that color is, and it will clean whatever part of your oil pastel you need to clean. Right now we just are using the top part of our oil pastel, and I had some green on there, so I'm going to take my finger, wipe it away, or I can color it off onto my messy mat, okay? If you're using crayons, you probably won't have this issue, but if you are using oil pastels, yellow can get pretty dirty, so we can just clean it with our finger, okay? Mine is nice and clean now, so I'm ready to add my yellow. And you guessed it, we're gonna color yellow right next to orange, okay? And I am going to go back to my 1 finger instead of 3 like we did for the orange. And we are starting to get a lot lighter now. As you can see, I'm trying to use my yellow, blend it into the orange by coloring right on top of the edge of the orange. And it's blending that orange color into our yellow. And I am gonna do that for every single segment on the top and the bottom. You might notice I have quite a bit of little pieces of oil pastel, and if that happens to you, then you can just carefully wipe them away. We don't want to smudge this, and remember, if you take your finger and you run it across these colors, they will smudge all over your paper. So we can carefully knock them off with our hand. I'm barely touching when I do that, or you can blow them off. Okay, we are ready for our last color, and it's the lightest color we're going to be working with, and it is white. And white has the same issue that yellow has. It can get pretty dirty because it's such a light color. So if your white is a little bit dirty, you can take your finger, wipe it off, or color a little bit on your messy mat. We don't want to color a lot because we don't want to waste our oil pastels, just enough to clean it off a little bit. And this is the last section, so what we're going to do with our white is we are going to blend those 2 yellows together, Okay, so I'm going a little bit on top of the top yellow and the bottom with my white, and I'm just going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth to blend those two yellow parts where we just colored together. Okay, and there's one section done. Now I'm going to go to the next one, blend these two yellows together. And that is creating our highlight. The highlight is the lightest part of our picture, and that is right here in the middle of our pumpkin. I'm going to do this for every single segment, and with our white we really want to go back and forth, back and forth. Oops, my oil pastel just broke. That might happen to you, and that's fine. Oil pastels break, crayons break. It's not the end of the world. We can still use them. Okay, and what I was saying was, notice I'm going back and forth on my pumpkin. I really want to make sure those two yellows are blended together and I'm not missing any white spaces. It can be kind of hard to see because we're using white, so it'll be hard to see the white spaces of our paper. But if we go over it enough times carefully, not scribbling, I'm just going up and down with my oil pastel like I have been, then we should be able to cover all of those white spaces. All right, and there is our pumpkin all colored using beautiful value. As you can see, this looks a lot more three-dimensional because we have a highlight, we have shadows, which creates form on our pumpkin. It looks a lot more three-dimensional. And after you get done coloring and adding value to your pumpkin, I want you to go over those brown lines just one more time, and I'm pressing down pretty hard to make sure those lines are nice and dark. Okay, we don't want to lose those lines and shapes that we made last time. We want to make sure that they are nice and prominent so that we can tell that this is a pumpkin. If we don't have those lines, then all these colors might mix together and it might just end up looking like a blob. So we want to make sure that these lines that we drew are nice and prominent, nice and bold. So I just went over them once more. And the last thing we have to color is our stem. And for our stem, we're just going to use brown and white. We don't need any of those warm colors. And I'm going to kind of do like stripes. So I'm going to draw a stripe of brown. Then I'm going to take my white and draw a stripe of white right next to it. And I want to stay curved. Since this stem that I drew is pretty curved, I want these stripes that I'm drawing with my colors to be curved as well. So it goes with the shape of our stem. And then I just did a brown stripe, so I'm going to do another white stripe. And by doing this, it looks like there are ridges in our stem. If you look at a real pumpkin stem, it has lines in it and ridges. So this is why I'm coloring it using these stripes, and I'm trying to blend those two colors together just like we've been blending on our pumpkin. Just going back and forth, making sure those lines are nice and bold and my colors are blended together. All right, and that is it. After you color your pumpkin using value and coloring your stem using those stripes with brown and white, then you are done for today. Now, next week we are going to color the background, and I'm not going to tell you what we're going to do for that just yet because we're going to save that for next week. So please leave your background white. Only color your pumpkin today using warm colors and value. All right, I hope you guys had a lot of fun coloring your pumpkin today. I cannot wait to see how your pumpkin is turning out. I know it's going to be amazing because you guys are amazing. All right, I'll see you guys next time. Bye, guys.